In this segment, we review some of the major themes of neuroeducation that I believe are important for educators to know. As you review this presentation, I invite you to think about how this information might inform how you approach work in teaching, leading, or training. Also, as you learn about the brain-targeted teaching model, you'll hopefully recognize some of these themes throughout the model. We'll begin by talking about plasticity. That's a common term used in neuroeducation, a word that describes the phenomenon that one's experiences change the brain structure and chemistry. Brain cells, called neurons, form connections and networks. Like any muscle, the networks strengthen with use. Rather than thinking of the network as a superhighway, which is worn away with use, neural networks are really more like paths in the woods. They grow with use. Those networks or circuits that are not used are pruned away over the course of development. The idea that the brain continues to change because of experiences is an important one for all educators to know. And understanding that the brain continues to develop throughout one's lifetime promotes the mindset that the capacity for learning is not fixed. It supports the idea of a growth mindset. Next, we'll discuss neurogenesis. Neurogenesis refers to the growth of new brain cells. It's critical in the developing embryo, but researchers have found that the brain continues to grow new cells in certain regions after birth and throughout our lifespan. Only about 15 to 20 years ago, scientists knew that the brain changed when neurons connected and formed connections, which is what we call plasticity. But the common belief was that the brain did not grow new cells. Now we know that the brain has the capacity in certain circumstances to grow new cells at any age. Like the concept of plasticity, knowing the brain is constantly growing and changing helps to promote a growth mindset with a profound understanding that experiences in a child's life can produce biological and behavioral changes as well. Emotions and learning. Our emotions can either enhance or inhibit learning. A structure in the limbic system of the brain called the amygdala is responsible for the perception of emotions such as anger, fear, sadness, and feelings of aggression. The amygdala is also essential in the storage of memories, especially those with strong emotion. It's connected to the prefrontal cortex, known as the thinking center. So, essentially, emotions can be thought of as a filter of sorts for higher order thinking. You may have experienced a time when your emotions hijacked your thinking. Maybe you experienced a time in class when you were told by a teacher that the math was going to be difficult for you, or that you were not going to be a very good artist, or a coach who pulled you out of a game because you made a mistake. I would suggest that all of us at one point or another in our lives could reflect on a time when we were downshifted. Our thinking and planning was replaced by emotions that prevented attending to anything other than what we were feeling in the moment. In other words, we were trying to process stress or negative situation and therefore no longer able to focus our attention on anything else but those negative or embarrassing feelings. Our work in educating any learner is to constantly strive to create a positive emotional climate, whether in a classroom, in a studio, an athletic field, or court, or meetings, or trainings in any organization. Most of us believe that our cognitive and affective domains are separate. It might be common for educators or trainers to tell students to leave emotions at the door. We're here to learn. We know that's not possible. Dr. Jill Bolt-Taylor, author of the book A Stroke of Insight, is a neuroscientist who experienced a stroke and chronicled her recovery. This quotation from her book sums up our knowledge of the effects of emotions on learning. Although many of us think of ourselves as thinking creatures that feel, biologically, we are feeling creatures that think. Next, we're going to talk about sensitive periods for learning. Scientists are learning more about important periods for rapid brain growth, both for early childhood and also for adolescence. This is often referred to as sensitive periods for learning. Sensitive periods are times in development when one's experiences have a strong effect on the construction of brain circuitry. Sensitive periods are windows of opportunity that exist for critical brain changes. If an individual does not learn something during a sensitive period, it will be harder, but not impossible, for them to learn it later. Sensitive periods are important for certain cognitive functions. For example, the area of the brain that controls understanding language will develop based on the phonemes that babies hear in the first years of life. Next, we're going to look at attention and learning. Attention is clearly critical for learning. The more attention the brain pays to a stimulus, the more elaborately the information will be retained. The brain is constantly bombarded with sensory stimuli. That which is attended to will encode the short-term and working memory system. Events that carry emotional arousal are more likely to attract attention than neutral events. These events then stay longer in our memory systems and are later recalled with greater accuracy. New and ongoing research in the area of attention is showing that it can be enhanced through specific training and by introducing novelty and visual images into the physical learning environment. Now we're going to look at movement and sleep. Scientists are learning more about how learning is affected by exercise and sleep. Exercise is known to improve alertness, attention, motivation. Movement and balance continue to develop throughout childhood. Research shows that children who are physically active have higher self-esteem than those who are chronically inactive. It has been well documented that students are offered less time for recess, or no time at all, due to the need to maximize instructional time during the school day for academic subjects. Yet, we know this practice runs afoul of the research on the effects of movement on cognitive development. It's important that school leaders provide time for students to be physically active. Teachers can also incorporate movement into instructional activities. For example, arts-integrated activities that require physical movement, such as choreographed routines or dramatic tableau, can be used to depict a concept connected to the learning activity. This gives students an opportunity to use body movements to show their interpretation of a concept. Sleep is critical for optimal learning. It is important for consolidation of memory. Sleep helps to remodel the brain, moving information from short-term to long-term memory systems. Research on sleep deprivation and the effects of adolescent performance is beginning to inform educational policies. Many schools are beginning to adjust school start times for middle and high school students to facilitate this biological sleep pattern. Next, we're going to look at memory, the retention of information. The brain's memory system is categorized as short-term memory for storage of sensory information, which may last from seconds to minutes. Working memory, which is not permanent storage, but is accessed by the brain as long as it's being rehearsed. And long-term memory that lasts for longer variable durations. The most important factor in determining how well we remember something is the degree to which we rehearse and repeat that information. Memory of information also depends on the number and richness of elaborations, as discussed earlier in arts and learning, and emotional arousal associated with an event or content. To increase memory for information, retrieval practice is a well-researched strategy. A large body of research is showing that passive studying through strategies such as rereading a text or highlighting content or reviewing a video or a class session produces limited retention compared to retrieval practice. Retrieval practice requires students to recall learned information using techniques such as creating quizzes, using flashcards, creating concept maps, playing a memory game, and most importantly, using the visual and performing arts to depict a content or concept. These strategies actively recruit memory systems, creating better long-term retention than passive studying, which relies on information input as opposed to information output. Next, executive function. That refers to cognitive processes that underlie goal-directed behaviors and higher order thinking skills. Associated with neural processing in the frontal lobe, sometimes referred to as a thinking center, the skills that are attributed to executive functioning are the following: holding information in working memory, initiating and inhibiting an action, shifting between and among activities, focusing attention to a task, planning and organizing work, self-monitoring, and regulating emotions. Far from becoming active all at once, executive function skills develop over time. Scientists believe that some competencies, such as emotional regulation, are not fully developed until the mid to late 20s. Many children diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder display deficits in one or more of the skills associated with executive function. Some educators hold that executive function skills can be enhanced through certain training programs that range from commercial brain training programs to mindfulness initiatives. Much research is needed to determine how to best develop skills associated with executive function. Executive function skills are important for higher order thinking processes and the application of knowledge. In short, the skills are critical for effective learning. These skills allow the learner to draw novel associations and flexibility and use information in different contexts. Next, we're going to talk about embodied cognition. Now, cognition is defined as the process of acquiring knowledge and understanding. The term embodied cognition is based on the notion that human cognition is originally rooted in sensory motor processes and thus determined by bodily experiences. This relatively new approach to cognition challenges traditional theories that the body is passive as the brain processes information. The theory suggests that learning is grounded in the learner's sensory motor system that interacts with the environment and culture. In other words, thought and movement are not separate neurological systems. Cognitive neuroscience research suggests that acquiring academic skills is linked to areas of the brain responsible for body movement in space. An example of embodied cognition would be learning math concepts by participating in whole body finger movements or using tableau, which are frozen body poses, to depict the feelings of a character in a story.